around the world over the last 80 years or so, since 1945. The record of military interventions, the number of coups, the number of cases of interference in other countries' affairs, the number of violations of international law. I mean, these things are routine. You know, they're routine and they're ongoing and they're permanent. And obviously, British and US governments say that they uphold international law and support for human rights and so on. But the reality of their policies is very different. UK military interventions around the world since 1945, and I got to 83. So that's 83 over the last 80 or so years. Not all of those are malign, but many of them are. I'd say most of them are malign. And I also looked at the number of coups that Britain has promoted around the world since 1945, and I got up to 42. I think that is a very conservative estimate because there's obviously a lot of stuff that British officials have been getting up to over the years that we simply don't know about. There's a lot of covert operations that have never come out into the public domain after decades. So we're dealing with dozens and dozens of cases of intervention in other countries' affairs. And most of those coups, I would say, are malign. I mean, they're overthrowing sometimes popular, sometimes democratic governments, and they are stopping independent development of societies and people around the world. And I think that the facts are actually incontrovertible, that there is this history. The only problem is that we don't see enough of it. We don't see enough of it in journalism. We don't see enough of it in the academic world. We should call Britain and the US rogue states, a kind of lieutenant role to the US. And sure enough, that has continued very, very strongly over the decades. I mean, I would say there are at least three main ways in which that's happened. I mean, there's a military function, which is where Britain plays the junior military role to the US in interventions around the world. We see that very clearly in, say, the invasion of Iraq in 2003. We see it now in Ukraine, and actually we also see it in Gaza, where it's the US that's providing a whole host of weapons to Israel. But the UK is conducting a lot of military activity, some of which we don't know about, as you know, because you've investigated this more than anyone else.